University-based research center for the study of LGBTQ people and ideas and histories. And our mission is to bring free, accessible LGBTQ studies to everybody. And that means that we welcome people to all of our events for free. We also, at all of our events, give people the chance to support us, to show their support for our public mission, our mission of accessibility, and our mission to bring LGBTQ studies to everybody. And so I just want to tell you how to do that. We have a giving website, and we'll put the link in the chat. And then I also want to show you what that site looks like and exactly how to contribute to CLAGS and to join our mission. This is our website at Network for Good. If you go there, you will see our ask, which is that we want you to help us to build a different legacy for LGBTQ studies, to move it from the most elite colleges and universities in the United States, which has given us so much so many rich queer ideas to think about, but we also want to relocate it at a public university for everyone. If you can go to our website at Network for Good, and today, if you can give $10, we have a board member the CLAGS board member, who has pledged to match the amount that we raise today. So if you can go and give $10, our board member will be happy to match those funds, and you will help us meet our goal over 3 years of raising $500,000 to build this different legacy for LGBTQ studies. Jenny, I just want to say thank you so much for kicking off our season at CLAGS. This is our first event. Jenny, you are a godsend as a student, as a writer, and now as a publicist at NYU Press. Thank you for starting us off, and thanks everybody for being here today.
Thank you so much, Matt. I do want to note that I started a recording. All of CLAGS's programming is recorded and posted on our CLAGS YouTube site for later viewing. And I'm also going to turn on captions as Jenny begins the workshop. I wanted to mention that in case you don't want your name or image viewable on the recording, just adapt your settings as needed. So now I'm going to introduce Jenny Rossberg, who is the publicity manager at NYU Press, where she works to promote a diverse array of scholarly and general interest books. She holds a BA in English Literature from the College of William and Mary and an MA in Women and Gender Studies from the Graduate Center at CUNY. And I'm going to turn it over to Jenny. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Laura and Matt, for that lovely introduction. This is a much bigger scale. I usually do author talks, as some of my NYU Press authors will know, one-on-one. So it's kind of exciting to get to talk to so many people at once. One of my favorite things to do as a book publicist is connect with my authors. You guys are my favorite part of my job, I will say. So for the workshop today, I just wanted to give you all a preview of the slideshow. One sec, I'm just gonna make my screen full size and then try sharing my screen again. There we go. All right, great. So I just wanted to give you all some really basic tips and tricks that I give to pretty much all of my authors. Obviously, my experience is currently quite anchored in NYU Press and what we do for our authors, and the particular way I pitch academics to the media. But I've also worked at Oxford University Press and a small trade publisher called Pegasus Books for a number of years. So I do have some perspective on some other industry trends. I will talk about, over the course of this, different kinds of books, ways you can communicate effectively with your publishing house, ways you can promote your own book, and across like a variety of different audiences. So an academic audience, a mainstream audience, and really how to take advantage of the networks and connections you already have. I think that's something I want to drive home throughout this presentation, is that you already have the tools available to you to promote your book, or your journal article or your scholarship in whatever shape it may take. So this is just about kind of activating and mobilizing you to know how to do it. I'm going to go through just 4 slides with some basic tips, and then at the end, I'll open it up to a Q&A. You can feel free to ask me anything about publishing, about NYU Press specifically, about your book specifically, whatever I can be of help with, I'm happy to assist. So I wanted to start out kind of strangely with a puritanical poet from the 17th century. Anne Bradstreet wrote this poem called The Author to Her Book. This is my favorite pep talk for authors who are nervous about putting their books out into the world and promoting themselves. Someone hundreds of years ago had the exact same anxieties you are having right now. She wrote about over editing her book and making it worse. She ends the book by saying, "I am only publishing you because I am broke and I need the money." This is something I think that will relate to a lot of academics and authors across the board today. So let's let go of some of the imposter syndrome. Feel confident that you have done the work, especially as a scholar, as an academic, to publish the book you are putting out into the world. And be reassured that it is completely normal to feel nervous. People for hundreds of years have felt nervous about promoting their books. You can do it. We're going to give you some really easy tips on how to. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is communicating with your publisher. One of my authors, Oren Kroll-Zeldin, is in attendance today, so I decided to use his book as my example banners. So shout out to Oren. Thank you for your supportive emails. I wanted to give you guys an example of some of the materials that your publishing house might already be putting together for you. Some of the things your publisher may or may not be doing for your book, and ways to communicate easily with them. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is knowing your publication timeline. The best thing you can do for promoting your book is getting an early start on promoting your book. Calendar reminders are a really great way to plan out how you are going to promote your book over the months leading up to and after its publication. I use a Google Calendar for everything I do. Whatever system works for you, just start organizing and getting a plan in place, working backwards from your publication date. So at NYU Press, typically, we have, different classifications of books. We have books that are intended for a purely academic audience, books that are intended for a general audience, and a great many books that fall somewhere in between. So those in-between books are often some of my favorites to work on because they have scholarly rigor, but they are connected to the news. They're relevant to, average people. You might find them in a bookstore. That's kind of, I think, a sweet spot for academic promotion. So working backwards from your publication date, I think you should probably benchmark 6 months out as a point you should be in contact with your publisher. That's usually the time when they're reaching out, asking you about blurbs, which I'll also talk a little bit about. They, might be preparing an advanced PDF of your book. Typically, you're going to be working, with a manuscript in a Word document, and then it's going to go to a production team. They're going to typeset the pages, which means they're going to make it look like book pages. At the point you have those typeset pages, you could probably start sharing those with early contacts. I think, especially with academics, there's a real, this is, to go back to the Anne Bradstreet poem, there's a real fear of sharing your work before it's like absolutely polished, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, your index is in place, everything has been fact checked, and it's perfect. If you want to get journal reviews in the first year your book is publishing, you should probably be okay with sending not quite the finished product out into the world and start to wrap your mind around that idea. So 6 months out, you might want to be in touch with your publishing house, asking what their plans are, seeing what you can do to support it. 4 months out, pretty good benchmark for like, okay, I had that initial talk. I know for me, it's like I made a bunch of really great plans. I made a great to-do list. I didn't do any of that stuff. So 4 months out, start doing that stuff. Start reaching out to people, share that PDF, have advanced materials you want to share about your book. 2 months out before publication is usually around the time, maybe 1 month, maybe 2 months, depends on your publisher, where the finished book is going to be physically available. So I'll talk a little bit about the different types of books, but there might be some contacts who are want to receive an early copy of your book. Keep an eye on 2 months out, 1 month out before the publication date. And then of course, it's always a great idea to make a big deal about your publication date. I think it's something to be celebrated. Even if you're writing a really niche academic monograph that, 24 other scholars in your field are going to read. If you have a public platform, post about it on social media. We'll talk about some other ways to commemorate the publication date. But this is just really to say, get a timeline and a to-do list in mind early. So the next practical thing, just a term I kind of wanted to define is galleys or ARCs. They're also called advanced reader copies, or maybe an advanced PDF. So if your book is one of the books that your publishing house has said, maybe we're actually going to have a mainstream audience for this. Maybe you wrote it with a general reader in mind, and you've published with someone who said, yeah, we're definitely going to reach out to a mainstream audience. They're going to print these early, well, they might, if they can afford it, they're going to print these early copies of your book. They're called galleys or ARCs. They're like cheapy paperback versions. They don't have the final manuscript. They don't have everything in like perfect working order. But the point of this is to get material out early to advanced reviewers. So even if your publishing house is not printing like a formal ARC, or galley, those are synonyms, you could ask them for an advanced PDF. That would be a good tool for you to inquire with your publishing house about having. The next thing I wanted to talk about is blurbs versus reviews and the publishing trade media, which is a little bit more on the trade side. You might not be getting submitted for these outlets like Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Library Journal. But you should ask. You should ask if your publishing house is planning to submit you to them. That's a really good question. And also gives you a sense of how they're envisioning the audience for your book. Do they see this as a book for a general reader, or are they envisioning this for a scholarly audience? And let me be clear, not every book should go to these outlets. They are not intended for really dense, academic monographs, even if it's your baby, it's your book, it's the most incredible research you've ever done. Keep in mind, like, not every review outlet is going to be a good fit for it, and trust your publisher, when they give you advice about where they think that it needs to be sent. Blurbs are a little bit different than early reviews from like a publishing trade media. Just to show you like a quick example, this is what Kirkus looks like. They're, an early, we call them trades, or pre-pubs. They review the book before it actually gets published. So, they'll cover it ideally a few months beforehand. And now I have to figure out how to navigate back to my slideshow. I'm so sorry. But not, like I said, not every book is going to be submitted to those outlets. So talk to your publishing house, figure out what they think is best for you. Go with what they think is best for you. Just give me one moment. There we go. All right. Blurbs are something that you can definitely help with. Blurbs are usually solicited by editorial assistants. So, whoever's second in command to your editor. These are really come from the scholar, the author who's writing them. So these are academics who who you're in touch with. You send them the manuscript, an early version of your book, and they, say a great thing about how smart you are and how erudite and professional your book is and how groundbreaking it is for the field. Those are great. Those are really excellent to have. Some publishing houses, I feel like Oxford has actually stopped soliciting blurbs. Some publishing houses don't use them as much. I personally really like them. I think they're a great way to get your book out in front of other scholars early, to help position the online presence of your book. Maybe you're a junior scholar without as much name recognition, but your thesis advisor is like down to blurb your book. It's always great to have someone else's name attached to the project, and have someone else vouch for it early on. So work closely with your publisher. They ask you for help. Pay attention to deadlines, get those in early. That's a huge thing I'm always harping on my editorial team about. A basic kind of definitional thing I thought might be helpful is marketing versus publicity. So marketing is content you pay for. Publicity is content you earn, is how I usually describe it. So this is helpful because, at a press like NYU Press, we offer like a really bespoke marketing publishing experience. We create a lot of materials for our authors. We have a really solid marketing team who's able to, send out our books to our email newsletters. We pay to send our books to conferences. We advertise them online. We pay to, boost search results on Amazon. These are all things that publishing houses do, and academic publishers can do as well. You might not be publishing with a place that has a huge budget for marketing. That's where I think you should pay attention to publicity. Publicity is something you have a little bit more control over. Ask your publisher about what marketing support they have to offer. And then, think about publicity as something you can do to promote your book that you have a lot of agency and control over. I'm a publicist. I send books around, solicit reviews. I set up interviews for my authors, but I always tell them, you are your own best publicist. I can blind email, a million different book review editors until the cows come home, and it will not have the same effect as you, tapping someone from your cohort and saying, hey, could you please pitch a review of my book to Science, or whatever journal it is, or you publishing an original article in the Conversation and having your book in the byline. There's a lot of stuff I think in terms of publicity that you have control over. So we'll talk about some of those practical steps on the next slide. The other thing I wanted to encourage you to do in terms of communicating with your publishers, to ask questions and ask them early. Ideally, I know, our standard process at NYU Press is we tend to send a big batch of marketing plans at the beginning of our season all at once. If you are a spring 2025 author, your marketing plan should be coming soon. We have to finalize details for the catalog. But it doesn't hurt to email and reach out, ask questions, see what your publishing house already has planned for you, and then figure out how you can supplement those plans with your own work and efforts. I think I put this is my big slash thing. Promo codes, social media assets, postcards and flyers. A lot of publishing houses will create these for you automatically. This is what I'm putting up on the slide here. You can see the tools we made for Orin, for this book in particular. We do standard postcards and stuff like this for every single one of our authors. We send you a link that has, this square banner that's sized for Instagram, and this long banner that's sized for Twitter, and this flyer that you can print out and bring to conferences, and a picture of your book that you could, use on social or on your website or on your LinkedIn or whatever it is. So pay attention, please, when we send you emails. There's probably a lot of really useful information in there. And, if you can't find it later, go back and ask. I'm going to say probably 99% of the time, your publisher is going to offer you a discount code that works on their website because they want to sell books directly to the consumer. Some publishers are a little bit too small. They're not set up to sell directly to the consumer. That maybe they don't have a promo code for you, but they're going to have a link they want you to promo. Maybe they're going to want to drive Amazon sales or something like that. So talk to them about ways you can help sell your book. Cover image utilitarian tool that you should definitely save early and just have on hand. You're going to need it. for events, for online use, that sort of thing. Book awards and conferences. I know at our publishing house, we pretty much submit authors to, I think, about 5 awards is standard. And we pay to go to a number of conferences. You know, I'm sure you all have gone to a conference and seen, you know, a big booth for Yale or for Princeton or for NYU. And they've got, you know, a bunch of books on display. You can ask your publisher and make sure that they're going to bring your book. I have some tips about how, just in case, you should bring your own book too. It's a really good idea, just in case. You know, double check with them about which awards they're planning to submit your book to. See if, you know, you have a much longer list of awards. Be aware that publishers have financial obligations in terms of submitting awards. It can cost hundreds of dollars. In shipping, in you know, paying award submission fees. So I think a lot of places have a pretty set number. Just ask, make sure you're clear about what they're doing. A lot of times they're willing to support your efforts and help supplement. You know, they'll make sure you can buy copies of your book at a discount if you need to submit your book for your own awards, that sort of thing. So just be communicative, ask questions. That's the main advice. And then my last point in communicating with your publisher, be responsive, check your email. Like ideally it would be great if we all checked our email, but I'm always a month behind on my email. So I'm not going to hold you to that. Be polite and say thank you. And remember, everyone is human. I'm going to talk about some kind of fail safes in terms of promoting your book, but you know, I want all of my authors to know if we ever miss sending your book to a conference that you were at and you were really disappointed that your book wasn't there, we're staying up at night. We're really like tortured by this information. Humans make mistakes, like errors get made, an award slips through, your book doesn't make it to a particular conference. Just know that your publisher is, you know, we don't do this because we're making big bucks in academic publishing. Like we care about the content, we care about our authors. We want you to succeed. I think we've all been in the position to want to, you know, fire off a testy email at 9 o'clock at night. I just always recommend like count to 30, take some deep breaths, maybe sleep on it, and come back to it the next day. Because you want to ensure you have a good working relationship with your publishing house. All right. So now we're going to talk about your audience. What audience do you have for your book? There are so many different types of audiences. I think my key advice is usually to go where you are already consuming information about whatever subject you're publishing on. So first of all, let me just start by defining some terms. I feel like you guys, this crowd probably knows what a monograph is, but you might not know what trade publishing is. So like trade publishing is like mainstream book publishing. It's like, you know, the books you buy at Barnes and Noble or you read about on Oprah's bestseller list or whatever. An academic monograph is like usually going to be intended for a much smaller audience, much more rigorously researched, much more expensive because we sell fewer copies of it. And then we have books, like I said, a lot of my favorite books at NYU Press are those books that fall somewhere in between, where, you know, it's written by a scholar, it's rigorously researched, but it's a really cool topic that maybe people want to learn more about. And this is where I would encourage you to explore publicity venues for yourself, is kind of thinking of yourself as an expert in your topic and figuring out who might be interested in that expertise. So what are you reading? Are you reading academic journals and their book reviews? Did that inform the book you were writing? You know, is something like I've given some examples of different media here, right? Like, do you want a book review in the TSQ? Do you want Law and Society to review your book? Think about who you think is going to be reading this book and where what audience it needs to reach. You know, there's a big difference between something like TSQ, them.us, which is like a mainstream kind of like, you know, trendy, interesting pop culture website, right? And then a media outlet that I think falls a little bit in between, NPR, where they are often interviewing experts and having talking heads come and talk about, you know, the news of the day. This was actually a really fun hit I got to score recently for one of my authors, Mel Stanfill, who wrote this really cool book called Fandom is Ugly, a piece of fan studies, media studies. And, you know, I sent a pitch around for their book that was, I'm going to say 80% academic journals, but I put NPR's It's Been a Minute on there because it's a pop culture podcast and they often talk to experts. And it happened to be the week that they were recording an episode about the Chapel Rowan fandom debates, which even though I look young, I actually don't follow. I know next to nothing about. So I was super excited. I was like, this is great. Oh my gosh. Yes, I'll loop you in with my author. And we were able to make it happen. And Mel got to be like on the podcast, it's a nationally broadcast podcast, you know, talking about their research for a more general audience, right? So that's what I mean, where sometimes things can fall a little bit in between. You can think about those possibilities. You also want to be realistic, though. You know, maybe your audience is not going to be listening to NPR. It's been a minute, or maybe that just wasn't the right fit. Maybe the timing, you know, that was a perfect kind of coincidence of timing that it landed just right. You know, that's not going to happen for everyone for every book. We'll talk more about ways to keep your eyes out there in terms of self-promotion. But I think it's important to set attainable goals. This means not the New York Times book review. We'll talk about that one in a little bit more particularity in my FAQ section. But I think it's important not to get too emotionally fixated on a particular outlet and then get really disappointed when they don't cover your book. And this goes for academic journals too, right? Like journal editors, book review editors are incredibly busy. They're receiving dozens, if not hundreds of, you know, new books publishing every year. You have to have kind of the right set of circumstances where the editor says, yes, this pertains to our journal. And then a particular reviewer picks it up their pile and says, like, I would love to, you know, spend hours reviewing this book for your journal for no money. And then, you know, the publishing timeline actually has to work out. So don't be too upset if you feel like you have this perfect audience in mind, this perfect outlet, this perfect way to reach your readers. Yeah, set attainable goals. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Your book will get in the hand of readers. It will happen. Oh, sorry. Okay, so simple tips for self-promotion. I tried to keep it to 7. Obviously, like there's a million different ways you can promote your book. I hope you guys have maybe some more questions at the end. I'd be happy to answer. But I want to go over some of the basic ways that you, as an academic, maybe publishing that $40 monograph that's, you know, only going to sell to a couple hundred other scholars, you know, how can you still reach a mainstream audience? How can you get your name and your ideas out there? So the first thing I really want to draw your attention to is op-eds and original articles. In particular, this great website called the Op-Ed Project. They offer really great advice for scholars, in particular from marginalized backgrounds who are writing about kind of like off the beaten path topics and how to fit your writing into the news cycle. So I included a link in this presentation. There's going to be a link to it you know, in the chat at the end of the Zoom. Just, you know, would highly recommend going there, reading through the advice that they have on how to write an op-ed. That said, I don't love op-eds. I personally don't read them. I'm not a huge believer in the hot take style journalism that seems to kind of dominate the news in many ways. That's why I am attracted to academic publishing. I think taking a little bit longer, having a little bit more research can be a great way to go about sharing your ideas. So if you're maybe not looking to fire off 800 words super fast and send it to the New York Times about whatever tragic breaking news relates to, your decades of research, you might want to look at something like The Conversation. The Conversation, I would assume have probably already heard of it, but they exclusively publish people who hold PhDs. They go through a rigorous, I think like 2 or 3 rounds of fact checking, very like solid journalistic standards. They don't pay, but they get picked up by a bunch of other media outlets. So it's called like syndication. A radio show gets syndicated nationally. The conversation gets syndicated in all sorts of other outlets, like Yahoo News will run an article that a scholar wrote for The Conversation. So think of yourself as an expert in your subject, and you might not be able to get that book review that eludes us all, but perhaps you can help your ideas reach the public by finding a news publication or a specialty publication that's interested in writing an original piece by you. The other thing I'm just going to say, I'm listing the op-ed project in The Conversation here. Your academic specialty probably has like, a big blog that you read. Like I'm thinking of like the Imminent Frame for religious studies. There's like all sorts of different particular blogs. Like find the place for your discipline that you read and try to write them an article relating to your book. That's a great way to connect with academic readers and general interest readers as well. All right, interviews, some basic places. The New Books Network is like great. They host so many different scholars on their platform. Faculty is kind of a similar project. They do 15-minute Zoom interviews where they just interview a scholar talking about their book. I think they're kind of up and coming, and I always have to tell my authors that their emails are not spam. Like if they're not asking you to pay for content, it's probably okay to say yes. Like, look at the link, look at what they're advertising. I think they just have really weird formatted emails. So if they reach out to you, I would encourage you to accept it. It's just a 15-minute free, okay, above board Zoom interview about your book. There might be specialty podcasts hosted by other academics in your field. Maybe your local NPR station is interested in interviewing you. Say you're a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, reach out to NPR. Oh, no, wait, that's Minnesota Public Radio. Well, reach out to the Wisconsin NPR. There's usually a public-facing email address for a lot of media outlets. If you aren't assigned a publicist, like if you don't have a me working on your book, I would encourage you to do some of that Googling yourself. It doesn't have to be 100 contacts, 200 contacts. You could reach out to 10 people about your book and, write 500 words relating your book to a current news event or talking about how it might be of, local interest to the community that you did an ethnographic study of, that sort of thing. Small is good too. Not everything has to be like national radio. You want to, again, go to where your readers are. Go to where maybe the people your book is about are. I would also suggest maybe writing a Q&A. I'm going to do the click thing again and briefly bring myself out of my slideshow, so bear with me. But I wanted to show you guys, NYU Press has a blog on our website. A lot of academic publishers have these. You might ask your publisher if they have a place for you to write about your book. Karen Thompson, author of Norm Porn, we did this like cool, sweet, short and simple Q&A, question and answer about her book. I just wrote really basic, like, please define this term for me questions. So, something easy like that could be something your publisher is interested in publishing. The other thing I've heard from a lot of authors is especially if you're planning to pitch yourself for interviews or you have a NPR interview coming up or something like that. It's a good way to practice what you want to talk about. I think it would also be applicable for things like academic book talks. You getting some experience in like your elevator pitch for your book, how you want to talk about it without academic jargon. It's a really good practice tool to keep in mind. All right, so bear with me. I'm going to toggle back to the presentation. All right. And then some basic tips. If it's a video interview or audio, maybe borrow a mic from the library if you don't have a great quality microphone. Record in a quiet space, not a kitchen, not a bathroom, no echoey surfaces. And don't wear like loud, like big earrings or like a windbreaker suit, like stuff that's going to make noise as you move around. Also try not to talk with your hands, which is hard. I do it all the time too. But just be aware of some of the practical stuff if you're recording an interview. All right, book events. There's kind of like two main types of book events I usually talk about. Obviously, there's like, infinite possibilities, panels and conferences and all this stuff. But usually I kind of divide this between like independent bookstore book talk and like academic book talks. So I usually offer help for the independent bookstore pitching. I don't necessarily think you need a publicist to do it though. If you have a local indie that you go to buy your books, go to it and tell them you're a local author and that you have a book coming out. And they might say, no, we are the Ripped Bodice and we only sell romance novels, or they might not be set up to do events, but just ask. It doesn't hurt to ask your local independent bookstore if they're interested in hosting a talk with you. The other thing I always encourage my authors to do, and this again has a link in it, but I don't want to click it, is to reach out to your universities you attended, colleagues who you're close with or not so close with, but institutions who might be interested in hosting you for an academic book talk. Sometimes they'll pay for you to travel, sometimes they won't. Publishers pretty much never pay for you to travel anymore. That's just like not a thing that exists anymore. So like keep in mind your own travel and budget restrictions. But it's a great idea to think about maybe like a author meets critic panel at a conference you're going to, or, at a minimum, see if your school or your department is interested in hosting a book talk for you. If you don't ask, like, they won't know that you have a new book coming out. So be sure you're, moving on to point 4, communicating with your school about your book coming out. Maybe you're, at a small liberal arts college and they don't have a massive PR team, or maybe you published on a controversial subject matter and they don't want to promote your book. That's fine. You don't necessarily need them, but you should reach out to them so that they're aware that your book is publishing. Sometimes alumni networks have like a, recent books by grads kind of thing. Like that might be something you want to reach out to about your book. Again, usually if you have a publicist, they will do this or help you do it, but not every academic book is assigned to publicists. So explore venues through your school, your department. I feel like this is a controversial one too. Make your students read your book. Course adoption is a really great way to sell copies of your book. Make your students read your book. It's okay. I had professors all the time assign their own books. Don't be shy. Make them read it. You worked super hard on it. It almost definitely relates to the class you're teaching this semester. Finding ways to connect with the student body via book talks is a great idea. But yeah, definitely just assign your book. That's usually like good starting ground. So next up, point 5, your colleagues. Again, kind of relates to book talks, but it's just a good idea to let your friends and colleagues know that you're publishing a book. I usually encourage, like, on my kind of my timeline, usually at the 2-month mark or the 1-month mark away from publication, send a blast email. If you're really going to plan a bunch of book talks, I've had, authors, who are super, super motivated, like really down to travel, and they'll set up like 10 book talks for themselves. That's awesome. Maybe if you're thinking about doing something like that, do that earlier in the game. If you're like, I really just think I want like a department launch, notify them ahead of time. But make sure, keep in mind, like for events, there's like calendar scheduling to keep in mind. So again, earlier is better in terms of event outreach, and mobilize your colleagues for support. You know, if you have someone who has a big Twitter following, like please ask them to tweet like a picture of your book. You know, I usually have my authors send like, especially for collected editions, which is jumping ahead a bit, but like just ask your colleagues, like, please reply if you're interested in writing a journal review, and we'll get you, you know, a free review copy of the book. Please let me know if you're interested in considering the book for course adoption. And again, the publishing house will send them a free copy of your book. But you know, your connections for that kind of thing are so invaluable to your press. We can, again, blind pitch, send email newsletters until the cows come home, but you tapping into networks that you already have will really help. Again, timing is something to keep in mind. So things like anniversaries, obviously like the publication date is a big deal, but I think for academic books, especially if you're maybe like, you know, publishing ahead of the curve, or you did research into this niche community, but news breaks like 2 years later, like you can still pitch, you know, an op-ed, or reach out to NPR and say like, I actually researched this exact subject. Let me know if you would like to interview me. You know, keep your eye out for things infinitely onward into the future, but also easy things, anniversaries, holidays, celebration months, you know, like Black History Month or Pride, things like that, where there's going to be ideally like your publisher is already thinking about stuff like that, and probably like promoting you on their website or in email newsletters. But you know, think about ways you can reach out to people. Maybe just circle back to your publisher and ask them, you know, a year after your book publishes, like, hey, it's Pride. Are you guys maybe going to send my book around an email newsletter? And the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, yes, we were definitely going to do that. And they'll put your book in an email newsletter. I'm not telling you, just to be clear, I'm not telling you to harass your publishing house with questions all the time, but be communicative, ask questions is a part of, you know, self-promotion. And then for collected editions, this is, you know, something I think a lot of us, you know, either publish in, or maybe you're an editor on something, mobilize your contributors. You have 10 people who can help you promote your book. So all of those like social media assets that I showed you guys on the last slide, make sure everyone has those. Make sure everybody knows the publishing date. Make sure people are posting on social and reaching out to their schools. Maybe you want to do a panel discussion, you know, talk to your contributors, send out a blast email 6 months before the book, 4 months before the book, 2 months, 1 month, you know, and try to drum up some energy. You know, maybe your contributors have ideas for events. Maybe they know someone who would like to pitch a journal review. You know, those are all kind of like fertile ground into which you can plant the seeds of book promotion. All right, so frequently asked questions. Some of these are fun, and some of these are actual practical advice. So the first one is just for fun, which is, how do I get in the New York Times book review? And my answer is always write a different book and publish it with a trade house. Your academic monograph is not going to be reviewed in the New York Times book review. I'm really sorry. They were also a bit overrated. So don't sweat it. Like I said, go where your readers are, set attainable goals for yourself, be nice to yourself. And please do not ask me if I'm sending your $45 academic monograph to the New York Times book review. I will not be doing that. Another one that's a little bit funny and a little bit real is, how do I become social media famous overnight? To which I, contrary to many book publicists in the world, say, do not do that. Don't. If you're not already on social media at the point where your book is publishing, you are not going to become social media famous overnight. Personally, I don't use social media. It makes my brain feel sad. But if you're online and you have a presence there, you know, if you're really active, great. Take full advantage of it. Like, tweet about your book, you know, put it out there, reach out to bookstagrammers or something like that. If you are maybe like me and you have like a basic Twitter profile that you never check, except to occasionally find memes that about academic book reviews, which I included for you here, you know, my advice for like online presence is like, make sure you are searchable. You know, if you have a Twitter, someone's going to Google your name. Make sure your book is like pinned right at the top. It's like a pinned tweet, or it's in your bio. You know, if you're active on LinkedIn, you know, for like professional networking, put your book on LinkedIn. Like, just make sure if you have an online presence, your name is out there somewhere, your book is also connected to it. That's just a really easy way to make sure if someone is searching for you, the book also comes up. But don't expect like book talk to like be a thing. That's just like a completely oh gosh, just like emotionally motivated serpent that no one in publishing can truly wrangle. So don't set your goals for like social media fame. Attainable goals. How do I pitch myself? You may be asking. Google is your best friend. Everything and everyone under the sun exists on Google. Like I mentioned earlier, most media outlets have at least one public facing email address, or, you know, a comment box you can fill out. Send them a link to your book. Tell them like how breaking news relates to your research. Do not use academic jargon. Explain your research like you are talking to like a, I don't know, someone at like a kindergartner. Like really, really truly train yourself to like simplify what you are talking about for a general audience. I think that is a huge challenge for a lot of academics. And you know, maybe it's not something you're interested in. That's also totally fine. But again, if that's the case, go where your readers are, set attainable goals for yourself, be realistic about who you're trying to reach with this book, this publication. And again, I will refer you back to the op-ed project, because they have great advice on how to craft a pitch and how to reach out to op-ed editors if that's like something you're interested in. How do I get my book reviewed in academic journals? Shamelessly email your friends and colleagues and ask them to pitch a review of your book is the best answer I can offer. Ideally, your publisher should be reaching out. You know, I tend to put together like a massive list of academic journals for, you know, to which I pitch a particular book, especially if it's like interdisciplinary. There are like a bunch of different journals that might reply. But, you know, I'll put together a list of 200 contacts and like 10 people respond. It's like how, you know, we send out a Zoom registration link and 100 people RSVP and 10 people show up. Like, keep in mind, your publisher is putting you out there, like chances are. But again, your connections are what's going to make a difference. So, you know, we recently had an author who just did a really great job, like early on, reached out to his, you know, his colleagues, sent them that early PDF, wink, wink, do that, of his book, and said like, you know, would you be interested in writing a review of this? Could I ask you to reach out to, you know, the Pop Culture Studies journal, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, and pitch a review of my book. That's what those bulk emails are for, once again. And maybe you get one reply. That's great. That's great. That's one reply you got that you wouldn't have gotten if you didn't do it. How do I get my book adopted for courses? Please adopt your book for your own course. Please do that. That's a really great idea. Also, ask your friends, ask your colleagues. This is where I'm going to say email listservs are your best friends. Like, are you on, you know, like HNet, like HistoryNet has like a great email listserv, and they often announce like new book publications. Publishers can't submit for that, but scholars can. You could submit your book to an email listserv. You know, does your department send a monthly newsletter around? Make sure your book is featured in one of those monthly newsletters. Like, ask your school about that. You know, again, email your colleagues, email contacts that you have, shamelessly promote yourself. And if you need to, be like, my publicist is threatening my life if I don't email you and ask you to adopt my book for a course. You know, I always tell my authors, if you're nervous, just blame your publicist, blame your publishing house, say like, you know, I'm so sorry, this is so embarrassing that I would ever ask anyone to read my book. But, you know, if you're interested, you know, my publisher will send you a free copy. So once again, just like, get your confidence up. You can do it. Ask people. You've probably written a book review for a friend. Maybe consider doing that if you want people to write book reviews for you. I don't know. But shameless self-promotion. Yeah, great idea. Awards. Your publisher is probably submitting you to awards. Again, they probably have a finite number that they're going to be able to submit you to. But you know, sometimes they might be able to help you out. If you ask for a little bit of help with more, I would also just recommend being clear about deadlines. And you know, making sure most places are going to send you like a marketing plan or like a list of things at the beginning. If they haven't sent you that or you're curious about it, just ask. And again, be polite, say thank you, but like just ask. Make sure it's on their radar. Keep it on your radar. And then my advice about conferences. This is the one where I want to make sure that you come stocked to every conference you attend with like fat stacks of flyers for your book to just like shell out on adoring fans. If you are going to an academic conference and you just published a book, bring your book to the conference. You should hopefully have an author copy by then. If you don't have an author copy, you know, if your book is coming out like a month after the conference, bring flyers, bring postcards, like bring materials to promote your book. If your publisher is attending, great, they'll probably have some of that material there. But just in case, you know, just in case. We had an author, like I said, like this was something that haunted me into the, you know, in the dead of night, who was like, I just went to Law and Society and my book wasn't at the booth and I was so disappointed it wasn't there. And we were like, we're so disappointed it wasn't there. We really messed up. We're really sorry. You know, 6 people looked over that list of books and it just fell through the cracks. It was just an accident. But you know, if you sidle up to your publisher's booth at the conference and you're like, I have a copy of my book right here. Let me just tuck it into the stacks. They're not going to say no to that. So just come prepared to academic conferences with materials for your own book to promote yourself. You know, I realize it might be weird to like talk to people and like hand them a flyer as you're going, but you know, you might just be carrying a stack of flyers and say, my publisher is making me give this to you, or you can, you know, put it on a table somewhere, or you go to a talk, make sure you have a picture of your, you know, your book if you're giving a talk at a conference. You know, just cover your bases, bring your book everywhere. You know, joined at the hip for the foreseeable future. All right. So now I would really love to turn it back over to you guys. I know that was a lot of information. I went through a couple of things really quickly. But is there anything I can clarify? Is there anything specific to your book you want to ask about? Anything at all? I'll go ahead and turn it over to the Q&A section. And you can put your questions in the chat. Or you can unmute yourself and just ask me directly, whatever. Also, Katie, that's great that you're assigning your book. That's really great.
Jenny, do you mind unsharing your screen so we can see you more clearly?
Yeah, totally. All right, great. Ying Chao, do you want to go?
Amanda raised her hand first. Can we go to Amanda first?
Sure. Okay, Amanda, go for it. Oh, Amanda, you're muted. I still can't. Wait. Okay. Okay, Ying Chao, do you want to ask? I think Amanda just has to work with her mic real quick.
Sure, I can go first. Hi, I'm Ying Chao Gao, assistant professor of sociology here at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'm proud, to be one of the NYU Press future authors, because I had a book contract under the new book series called Queer/Trans Studies in Religion. I'm working together with Jennifer Hammer, and all the NYU Press staff are so wonderful. Thank you so much. I have a couple questions related, and thank you so much for the wonderful presentation as well. I cannot wait to bring my book baby to tour around the world, to use the conference. in all 5 continents, to introduce my study about the liquid conservatism, transnational network between Taiwan and United States, to talk about the the anti-LGBTQ movements. But well, one is, do you have any recommendations about what people need to take care of, if they want to sell or introduce the books outside of the United States? Any tips or any concerns that people need to be aware of, if we try to think outside of the American-centric box? And 2 would be like, I know we have some authors' copies that we can buy with some moderate discount. And I also learned that some colleagues would hire a part-time worker to work with them, when they make a prestigious keynote speech here and there, and the staff can help them to sell the books copies. But what kind of the customer tax or any rules we need to be concerned with if we do that, or in addition to combat our imposter syndrome, to do some shameless self promotion? Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. Also, Ying Chao, I think we met maybe at NWSA like 2 years ago. So it's really lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for coming. So in response to your first question about global promotion for your book, so I can answer this on 2 fronts. The first, which I think is maybe the most direct, is just translation rights. So translation rights are typically contractually held by the publisher. In NYU Press's case, we send a representative to the Frankfurt Book Fair, which is an international book fair hosted in Frankfurt, Germany every year, where publishing professionals meet to wheel and deal. And that's typically where translation rights, audio rights, things like that are made. Obviously, it's the age of email. You don't have to meet people in person or attend that conference. But most publishing houses have either like a deal with someone to like translate it into another language. The other thing is distribution rights. So sometimes like we will, NYU Press, for example, will sell the distribution rights for a book in China to a Chinese publisher, or in Canada to a Canadian publisher. In which case, like, you will get like a second contact who's your, publishing house representative for that particular market. In terms of outreach, I think, a good thing for us to be in touch about is just any international journals that are interested in covering the book. Even if it's like only written in English and you want to promote it in a market that speaks another language, as long as there are like scholars who are, still interested in the book, I think that's definitely something workable. And again, like, pitching yourself, news media pitching yourself is not limited to, just an English speaking audience or an American audience. So I think that's something we can kind of like finagle around the particulars of, but definitely listing, in kind of, we usually have people fill out an author questionnaire. That's pretty typical for most houses. If there's a particular journal that's based overseas that you would like your book sent to, just make sure you list that and are upfront with your publisher about the expectations. In terms of hiring help to like actually sell books, so to sell books at an event, that's interesting. I've actually never heard of that. I've definitely worked with like bookstores to sell books at an event. So like, we'll have a panel of multiple authors, or a university will host department talk, a book talk. In which case, your publisher will likely be able to help you. I can say for you specifically, like NYU Press can definitely help you find like whatever bookstore is on campus to like sell books at the event. So you're not having to like worry about buying your own author copies and selling them back to students. Sometimes university departments like to buy the books, at a discount and sell them full price as a fundraiser for their department. So that's, another option some people pursue. Does that answer your question about that particular element? All right,
Yeah.
Great. Did I get everything? It was like a multi-part question.
Yeah, you got everything. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for coming. All right, Amanda, over to you.
Does it work now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry. Okay. Hi. I have a question about the book talks. Well, I guess 2 things. One, like, okay, well, I was just working on this today. They want like the title and the abstract for the talk. Should it just be like well, like the name of your book with Amanda Baugh, right? Or should it be like, should I be focused on more like the argument in one chapter and talking about that, or like just a broad overview of the book, or something more specific? And secondly, I was also getting worried because now I'm signing these like video release forms, so they're going to record it. And then does that mean I need to say something different at the other one, or as opposed to just like having my talk and going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in general, it depends on the venue. If you're giving a talk to like a particular academic institution where like they're really only going to be interested in like this particular part of your book, it might be worth retitling the talk and redirecting your abstract to focus on a particular chapter. If you see that being like actually what you talk about, if it's just going to be a general overview of the book, I mean, we write that editorial copy for a reason, you know, you should be able to just put your title, what the book is about, you know, that sort of thing, into the qualifications. And then for video releases, I think it's mostly just gonna be stuff like this, where they want to record the talk, to have it hosted online in perpetuity. So I don't think you really need to worry about like, oh, I called this talk title of my book and this other talk title of my book, because if they post it online, it'll be like, institution hosts Amanda Baugh about title of book. So it will still be different when, they post it online. Awesome.
I actually have a question. I'm gonna
Go for it.
jump in. So I want to hear a little bit about timing. You're talking, your advice has so much to do with the moment that the book is published, that sort of, the release date, the pre and after the release date. But say your book was published in 2019.
Yes.
Right. When does this advice kind of expire?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, for people who don't yet have the book out, like, or maybe earlier in the stages, maybe before the contract even, they're still like, so on the early side, what can people do to get themselves set up to be able to put this advice into place? And then on the post side, at what point should we just kind of move on to the next project, or stop this kind of intense marketing that you're advising?
Totally. Okay, so we'll start with the leading up to publishing your book, right? So if you don't have a link to share for your book, like it's not up on your publisher's website, don't stress too much about all this early stuff I'm suggesting. Like you need it has to be far enough along that you can say like, my book is publishing in 2024 with NYU Press, and you have a link to it. I've seen scholars sometimes just put in their Twitter bio, if they've like officially signed a book, they'll put like the title and like forthcoming with Duke in 2027 or whatever it is. So if you are trying to lay like early groundwork, it never hurts to just have stuff searchable out there, but the title of your book might change like a million times. Publishers love to mess with your book title. I think until the point where you actually have a link up, you shouldn't sweat it too much. That said, if you're researching something and there's like breaking news that relates to your research, you don't have to like save your perfect opinion piece pitch because you haven't published the book yet. You can still write to the conversation, write to the New York Times, wherever it may be, say like, I have been conducting research into this exact subject for the last 5 years. I have a book forthcoming with XYZ Press, and that kind of early thing, writing that piece for the conversation can be a great way to just like connect your name to that topic on the internet. And if you have an early publication, that's also something that publishers look at sometimes to see how much of a profile or boost they think the author will give to a book. So it's a great idea. If you see the perfect moment, if you feel compelled with all that free time, I know all of you scholars have. That's a joke, just to be perfectly clear. So that's one way you can think of it, is like, an op-ed never hurt anyone. So on the back end, right? Your book published in 2019. What do I do? What do I do with this lumpy baby that is chained to my ankle like a old ball in an old timey prison cartoon? So first of all, there's never really a time that like you like put the book completely away, you never promote it again. Like I think you should think of it as like it's kind of connected to you a little bit forever. Certainly when you have maybe like a second or third publication, like you're going to shift your attention to those. But in terms of your web presence, like your book should still be visible on your web presence. That's like just generally a good idea. Again, like if there is something like topical that comes out, you know, the hit new vampire TV show that all the teens are watching, and you happen to be a professor of Gothic literature with really strong opinions about whatever vampire representation is out, like you could write an article and have your book in the byline, you know, about, you know, whatever the subject is. That doesn't have to be completely wedded to the publication date. You do make a really good point, though, that your publisher is not going to be paying as much attention to you after that initial like push of publicity and marketing promotion. This again is maybe comes back to what I said about timing with anniversaries, you know, holidays, that sort of thing. Is your publisher, like, do they have a blog or an email newsletter, and are they promoting books around Halloween? Like that could be something, you know, you would ask about. I think you can stay present with your publisher years after your book has published. You don't have to feel like you're, you know, your book published, like they kick you out, it's done. Their attention will move on. Like we're publishing, you know, so many books a month. But as long as you're out there advocating for your book, your publisher is usually going to be happy to help support your efforts, send a book to a reviewer, retweet an article you wrote, that sort of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome.
We have another hand.
Shayna.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for this wonderful, informative talk. And by the way, to Laura, I just watched a YouTube video where you were talking about vampires and all of that. I love vampire movies and literature. So that talk was, I really enjoy your talk. Just want to share that with you.
Thank you so much.
So I have a kind of very specific question. So my book is coming out in 2 weeks, and so it's about queer, but the book is written as a sci-fi. So I think there might be some potential for like film or future comic adaptation.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if or should I at this time also kind of like a push that possibility a little bit. I mean, I'm not really, you know, like intensively wanting to promote the book, but I do see that possibility maybe down the road. So can you give me some advice on that?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, obviously my specialty is not sci-fi, but I think I can say for film auctioning and comic book auctioning, you should see what your, I guess, your rights kind of look like. Are you self-publishing or do you have a publishing house?
I'm with Michigan. So
Michigan. Okay. All right. Great.
It is an academic book, but the form is a little bit different. So I call that speculative ethnography.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it's like written as a fiction.
Awesome. Okay, that's really cool. So you should ask your house about who is holds those rights. Usually those go to the author for most academic books, and like any, you know, royalties that would come from it. You can certainly ask them, although I would imagine that Michigan doesn't have like a huge push to get you know, books adopted for film or comics. So something you might consider is kind of tuning into other places where, you know, other sci-fi books are being reviewed, if, you know, the publishing house isn't already. You know, just to say, like, if you get kind of some base media attention going forward, it could increase the likelihood, you know, of something being adopted later on. So, I would look at, Tor has a great blog where, people write original pieces. They sometimes run excerpts from books. Websites like maybe Literary Hub, which is really interested in kind of new forms of writing. And I think would especially be interested in this kind of like creative writing approach. And I can actually, I'll just write those down. Tor and LitHub. And then again, like Google is your best friend. So I would just like see, what else is out there in terms of like sci-fi media, things that are being reviewed, and see if you might drum up a little bit of attention. Like give yourself like an hour or two. You don't have to make this like a massive like full-time job, but making sure you're reaching out to the places where sci-fi and fantasy readers are could be a great way to kind of get your book in the mix for something like that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Dawn, I see, has a question.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a book coming out in April called Contested Curriculum, LGBTQ History Goes to School, and it's with Rutgers University Press with their Q+ Public series. It's a short book series. And so I sense, because it's the history of LGBTQ K-12 history education, basically, like the effort around it. Every time a new Don't Say Gay law comes up or anything like that, there's going to be an opportunity to push the book in some way. I'm wondering if like is there any utility in sort of like, should I have like a standard thing that blasts out to various education media outlets that's like, just a reminder, like just do it over and over again? Because this is something that will probably stay, unfortunately, meaningful for at least until this culture war burns out.
Yeah, that's definitely not a bad idea. Certainly having like a catalog of emails and contact like information that you're interested in reaching out to. That's basically what my job is. Like news breaks and I send a pitch around for a book that says like, hey, once again, like you might be interested in taking a look at this book or review it or, interviewing this author. The other thing you might look into is, again, like publishing a piece earlier. So like look at the conversation or something like that, where you could write something a little bit more like it's something in between, right? A little bit more academic that goes into your research in a bit more depth, but accessible to a general audience. And having a link that's like, hey, I wrote, a 1,500 or 1,000 word article on this for someone to read, is going to be easier for them to digest than necessarily like the information about the book sometimes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I can ask a follow-up question. So I get the sense that this book is more likely not going to be like assigned in like queer studies classes so much, but it might be assigned in like ed programs. And I don't really know anything about ed programs, like really.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestion for sort of how to reach to like get course assignments like that's kind of far outside? I'm a women's and gender studies professor. I'm trained as a historian.
But like, education classes. So, I mean, I can tell you the way we do course adoptions, which, basically a publishing house will often pay for a service that's like an aggregate of a bunch of different professors' email addresses. A lot of that information, like, your email is available online, your listing is available online. Basic Googling of like top universities with education programs, and then see who's teaching a class and see what their, a lot of people put syllabuses up online too. You can just copy and paste like 10, 20 email addresses from scholars who you think might be interested in the book, and include them in that kind of email I was talking about. Just saying, hi, introducing yourself. This is my book coming out. My publishers asked me to do some promotion for trying to drum up course adoption. If you're interested in a free copy, they'd be happy to send you one. Just let me know, that kind of thing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Matt, you have a question?
Yeah, a quick question. Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we raised $50 tonight, which means we raised $100 because of the matching. Thank you so much, everybody. Jenny, it seems to me that there's another audience that we need to promote ourselves to, and that's very internal to our own departments, our own administration. And not even our colleagues who are our friends who will help us, but the people who will be determining our future based on whether they know us our work very well or not. Do you have advice to how to promote yourself within your own institution?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, you guys are already experts in self-promotion in terms of applying for tenure, right? You're used to having to compile your accomplishments, and promote them to another audience. I would say, again, this is where I turn back to things like institutional book talks, making sure that you're, setting up a book, try to set up a book talk with your department. If they won't host one, see if there's a, related department that would be interested in hosting you. Reach out to your university's PR department, and see if they're able to give you any help. Those sorts of things can just help you within the university. And then I think it's also completely in the realm of professional like sensibility to say, send an email that says like, hi, I'm a professor at your school and I've published a new book. Please let me know if you're interested in receiving a copy. And sometimes people feel bad and they'll just say yes because they don't know how to say no. That's great. But send them a copy of your book.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I think if we have any last questions, we could take one more and then we're going to wrap it up. So while we're waiting for someone to raise a hand or put a question in the chat, I just want to say that at my college, our bookstore often will feature the books of those faculty who have published, right? So having like a table with faculty publication, sometimes they'll have a book, they'll let faculty come and have a book talk in the bookstore and kind of crosses over in that course adoption territory. So I don't know if that's common, but that's what we do here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, again, like going back to like where do you shop? Where do you read? Like look at how you're discovering books and try to find a way to get your books there. Yeah, Ying Chao, do you have another question?
Yes, I have a follow-up question about the book award. I learned that there are two ways to get the nominations. One is the self-nomination that people can easily do, and the other would be is more like a campaign. I know some authors would draft a nomination letter and invite some prestigious scholars in their own field to nominate the book together. But can I also know more information about like how to get your own book nominated in, as many subsections within one discipline or across different conferences as possible? And, what is the best scenario or strategy that people can use, to get the publicity or reputation there?
Well, that's a great question that I think I just learned something from, which I didn't know that people did that for their awards. So I think you're already ahead of the curve there. The more work you can do for other people to help them promote your book is, the more likely they are to help you. So I really love that idea of, reaching out to colleagues and saying like, hey, I have a nomination letter. If you like my book and you're interested, would you be comfortable submitting this? Your publishing house will also submit you for kind of standard, like I said, typically 5 awards, standard number of awards. And beyond that, I think you should just look at what other awards you're curious about being submitted to, look into the submission processes. Sometimes if it's like, they just need 5 copies of your book to consider. For a lot of publishing houses, that's a pretty easy costs that we can write off, and we're happy to send those 5 books. If it requires something more labor intensive, you might just offer to be the one to make the nomination or like to have to pay the fee because of like budgetary limits. But make a dream list. I always say like shoot for the stars, and if you fail, or shoot for the moon, if you fail, you'll land among the stars. So it never hurts to ask. And definitely in terms of asking colleagues to nominate you, I think what you just said is already like a really great approach. Just making sure that they have your book in hand, they're aware of the publication, sending letters to people you respect, who you would like to nominate your book is a really great idea.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks again. I'm getting a Zoom notification. Sorry, you all can hear me, right? Okay, all right.
Yes,
Thanks
sorry, I was
again.
muted, but yes.
Oh, you were muted. Okay. Thanks again, Jenny. This has been so useful, and something that I think is going to be really valuable for us to return to again and again. So just a reminder that this has been recorded, and we will get it up on the CLAGS YouTube channel to archive it forever. So you can always return back to it. It has just been wonderful to have you. And if you all have appreciated this free public programming that CLAGS has presented via the generosity of Jenny Rossberg, please donate to CLAGS. We're going to drop that link in the chat one more time. And remember, your donations tonight will be matched by a CLAGS board member, so they're twice as powerful. If you don't feel comfortable donating online to our Network for Good campaign, you can write the old-fashioned way, write a check. We have the instructions for writing a check. Pay attention to those, as any large public university does. CUNY also has quite a bureaucracy that requires, certain things in your subject line and your memo line. And so that's all there in the chat for you as well, if you want to send a check. I also want to remind you all that we have a whole year of programming coming up through CLAGS, and we are so excited that this is our launch to the fall season of CLAGS programming. Our next event is part of a queer globalization series. It's going to be Rethinking Queer Globalizations on Wednesday, September 18th at 4:30 p.m. And we have a link and a poster there for you to register. This is going to be a hybrid event. You can come in person or watch it online. So thanks again, Jenny. We really appreciate you and all of the information you generously shared with all of us. And thanks to everyone who attended tonight. We'll see you at the next CLAGS event on September 18th.